A very good evening to you. This is ENCA Moneyline, your money guide. My name is Duduzile Ramela in for Sikim Kabadeli this evening. Coming up on the show tonight. The World Economic Forum gets underway in Davos, Switzerland. We're live to Sikim Kabadeli in a few. Good news for consumers as Stats SA announces lower inflation. And Moneyline features a new app that calculates just how much lobola you should be paying. We start with good news for consumers. There's been a decrease in the price of utilities and food items. Data from Stats SA shows that consumer inflation, or CPI, slowed to 5.3% last month. This is in comparison to the 5.8% decrease in November 2014. The lower petrol price and food prices are some of the drivers of lower inflation. December marks the fourth consecutive month that CPI stayed within the Reserve Bank's 3 to 6% target range. Now, this data will naturally be considered by the bank's Monetary Policy Committee when it meets next week. Financial services giant Firstrand has today sold new and existing shares worth almost 4.7 billion rand. These were sold on behalf of the beneficiaries of the Firstrand BEE staff scheme. Firstrand says the new shares will be listed on January 28, subject to stock exchange approvals. The shares were placed at 46 rand, while the MMI Holdings shares were placed at 28 rand 50 cents. South African companies are required by law to meet targets on black ownership. The bank's shares fell 2.5% over stock dilution on the JSE. That's after the new issuance. The World Economic Forum kicked off in the Swiss ski resort of Davos today. This year's theme is improving the state of the world. The event brings together some 2,500 heads of state, business leaders, philanthropists and artists. President Jacob Zuma had discussions with Anglo-American CEO Mark Cutifani on the sidelines of the conference. Now, while Trade and Industry Minister Rob Davies took part in a panel discussion, Davies used the platform to highlight the need for Africa to build a more supportive, integrated cross-border economy. He says the South African government remains committed to creating an environment that will facilitate investment, job creation and growth.
What we've got, I think, compared to China, is that China had the great advantage of colonialism not dividing it into 54 different countries, which was the fate of the African continent. And so our domestic markets are all too small to support on their own, or even to contribute significantly to the size of the domestic market that can support and sustain industrial diversification and industrialization. And so we embarked on some very ambitious regional integration programs, essentially seeking to broaden integration across our existing regional communities, create large markets across the African continent, but also to address a very, very significant infrastructure deficit. The infrastructure deficit exists in particular in infrastructure that links up our economies one to another.
Meanwhile, South Africa will play host to a live earth music event that's aimed at creating awareness on climate change. On June 18, concerts will be staged in Paris, New York, Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Sydney and Cape Town. The final gig in Antarctica will be played by a band of scientists at a research station. 2 billion people are expected to tune into the 24-hour event across nearly 200 television networks. Now, each individual concert will run for 4 to 6 hours. Live Earth is aimed at rallying public support for climate action ahead of the United Nations talks in Paris in December. The initiative is supported by world-renowned pop star Pharrell Williams.
Instead of just having people perform, we literally, and I can't go all the way into it now because some interesting surprises coming out soon, but we literally are going to have humanity harmonize all at once. And I am very, very, very happy and proud to be a part of this, this moment for our species. We're a very precious species, and if we've learned anything from what David's shown us earlier, is that it takes the perfect conditions. And I think that we have to continue to give to that idea of it being a perfect condition in this world.
And joining us from Davos, Switzerland this evening is Moneyline's Siki Mgabadeli. Siki, great to have you with us, and thank you so much. As the first day of this forum kicked off, what was Zuma's message on South Africa's role in achieving Africa's growth agenda?
Thank you, Dudu. And really the big message here is around the need for Africa to collect themselves together and work together in building up our infrastructure. The president talked about the collaboration that's taking place between leaders on the African continent to build a north to south corridor. In fact, at an earlier panel discussion today about the Africa's growth and development path, President Paul Kagame of Rwanda was talking about how up until recently, it took 33 days for a container from Kigali, the capital in Rwanda, to get to Mombasa, and he says now they've managed to reduce that to 6 days. So more and more of those issues around ensuring that our countries are linked together, that we can do intra-country trade and not just depend on the outside world was a big theme for South Africa here today.
Siki, with South Africa expected to be an underperformer again this year, how are investors approaching South Africa as an investment destination?
I think the South African team South Africa, as they're calling themselves here, is going to have a lot of questions to answer tomorrow when they convene all our ministers. We're going to be speaking to a group of 80 business leaders, global business leaders, who will put some of those questions to them. The question around energy, of course, has been a big one. And you'll know, due to that, Bank of America Merrill Lynch actually estimated that 3 months of power cuts can actually shave off 1 percentage point of economic growth. So the question around our energy supply is going to be a big one. Of course, there are questions around the commodities problem at the moment, and they're calling it the resources recession. There's a session that was talking about that as well. That's something that we're going to have to deal with. And of course, labor unrest, I'm sure, is another question they're going to have to answer tomorrow night when they have that big meeting with business.
A number of issues will be dominating this meeting. We've got terrorism, the falling oil price, and of course, the widening gap between the rich and the poor. What does this mean for South Africa? Will we have to stand that much taller and speak that much louder to be heard?
It's a question I actually asked Brand SA's CEO, Mila Matola, about how easy it is or difficult for us it is to stand out amongst all these other countries. There's a new buzzword that's been doing the rounds since last year, and that's the mints. Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. They seem to be taking some attention away from BRICS. But Brand SA is here. They're taking people out in the South African flag with the scarves, and you see a lot of non-South Africans wearing them. But I think the one thing that the scarves do is they get people asking about the country, asking about where things are, what are we working on, and where do we stand. But I do think it is a little bit harder to get attention, definitely this year.
One can only imagine. Thank you so much, Siki. That's where we'll leave it. That was Moneyline's Siki Mgabadeli in Davos. Now, significant exposure to emerging economies has left consumer goods giant Unilever reporting weak sales growth. Unilever goods are sold in some 190 countries, and the slowdown in emerging markets is beginning to sting.
Basic household goods should be the easiest to sell, but cash-strapped households and slow-growing emerging markets economies are bucking the trend for Unilever. The company's full-year results came in at a disappointing 2.9% growth, with fourth-quarter numbers falling below market expectations.
The emerging markets and developing markets need to be split into two groups. Those that produce commodities, who are suffering at the moment, and those that actually take commodities and use them, such as India and China as good examples. So actually Unilever will be in a position where it'll be in countries where it can benefit from this, whilst at the same time suffering from those that are going to have weaker positions for the moment.
Emerging markets account for half of Unilever's sales, and the slowdown has already forced the company to cut costs. Last year, it restructured, letting go of 1,400 employees, significantly reducing its product lines and selling off some of its underperforming assets, including Slim Fast brand, Bertolli pasta sauces, and Skippy peanut butter. Chief Executive Paul Polman says he doesn't see significant improvement in market conditions in 2015 and expects full-year results to be similar to last year's. So where can Unilever find the growth?
So I would point particularly obviously to Asia, whether it's South Asia and Southeast Asia. These economies aren't stopping. These economies are going to be continuing to grow. Therefore, the development of those brands, and although we've seen some issue about the top level brands being hit in the luxury good area, that doesn't really affect Unilever so much. The development of all those things from soap to shampoo and all those other areas, there will be rising demand for it.
A modest pickup in North America was partly offset by Europe's shrinking market, but Unilever remains a significant force. 2 billion customers are said to use at least one Unilever product every day.
Now, it's the beginning of the year, and usually at this time of the year, most people are cutting down on their budgets, and most people will, of course, cut down on their budgets for medical aids. Talking to us today about medical aid schemes is Senior Manager at the Council for Medical Aid Schemes, Thembekile Paswane. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Now, somebody sitting at home thinking, I need to join medical aid, what sort of research do they need to do in choosing a medical aid scheme?
Most importantly, the things that they need to do is to do needs analysis. They need to look at their health condition as well as their budget. Two things, that is, look at your health condition, yours together with the family members, the ones that you want them to join as dependents under your medical scheme, and look at your affordability. Because once you join a medical scheme, you need to pay a premium. So you need to make sure that you'll be able to afford a particular medical scheme that you want to join.
To your point of affordability, most people these days are going for hospital plan. So what's the difference between having full-on cover and just taking hospital plan?
There are a number of differences, but due to sake of time, I'll just highlight 2 or 3 of them. You'll find that if you join a hospital plan, there are limited benefits. You find that in some instances, if you want to join them, they've got the right not to accept you as a member. So they are discriminating on a number of grounds. It could either be age, gender, health status, or any other arbitrary ground, which I'll call them. But if you join a medical scheme, any medical scheme is obliged to accept you as a member. There's an open plan provision in the Medical Schemes Act which applies any medical scheme that you want to join, that they need to accept you, but that applies to open medical scheme. Open medical schemes refers to any medical scheme that is open to any member of the public, unlike those that you may join as a result of your employment or trade or profession. So any other medical scheme needs to accept you.
What are the sort of main or typical grievances that you get from medical aid members, people who have medical aids, who are having trouble with their medical aid schemes?
You'll find in some instances a member is entitled to a benefit for a certain cover. However, there are limitations or exclusions in respect of that particular cover. You'll find that members are in a wrong because they don't read their benefit brochures. Where they join a medical scheme, find that they give them information. These are the things that they need to look out for. You find that they run to council and complain. You find that the medical scheme is not at fault. They fund it in terms of what the contract stipulated that the member entered to with them. However, in some instances, you find medical schemes shortchanging the members instead of funding the benefit as per the rules or the cover. You find them short paying those accounts or declining cover at all. Those are the members then that come to Council for Medical Scheme for assistance. That's then they lodge grievances, which we are obliged in terms of the Medical Schemes Act to act into those complaints.
I mean, from what you see and what you deal with, do you find that people know exactly where to go when they have a problem with their medical aid scheme?
Some do. We're trying very much to make sure that we're out there in the public to inform members of their rights, responsibilities, as well as obligations. We're the only office in the country. Council for Medical Schemes is based in Pretoria. So we do education and training. You'll find that there's a team that is responsible for that. They go into every province where they advise members. They go further than that. You'll find that approaching even employers or even hospital groups, they come to us where they need assistance. You find that then that department that goes out there just to give people information and tell them about our services. And we like to even publish documentation circulars. We find that the newspapers, any other media, we're out there just to reach out to consumers because, you know, they are all over the country. The limitation is that most of the people who may benefit are those that are in Gauteng because the office is based in Pretoria. But we try by all means to reach the members out there.
Knowledge is power, and it's so important for people to know where to go should they have a problem. Thank you so much for your time this evening. That was Thembekile Paswane, Senior Manager at the Council for Medical Aid Schemes. After the break, how do you feel about using an app to calculate just how much lobolo you should be paying? You're watching ENCA Moneyline, your money guide.